Investigators say he allegedly hired someone to kill another local rapper back in 2020.
Well, if rappers are saying, and I say rappers in their characters using their stage names, but if they're saying, I did this, I did that, if you strip that of all of its artistic intent, if you negate it as rap, as an art form, it can sound like straight confession. That's a perfect way to send people to jail for something they didn't do.
What was the point? That's what Yella Beezy said in 2024 when he was asked why he'd never publicly addressed Mo3's death. 3 words: no explanation, no drama. And depending on who you ask, that answer either sounds like an innocent man who genuinely had nothing to say, or it sounds like someone who understood exactly how much was at stake in ever opening that door. Now, with a capital murder trial less than 6 weeks away, that quote is getting a second look. And so is everything else the state of Texas has been quietly building against him for years. Maris DeAndre Conway grew up in Dallas and came up through a scene the rest of the country never gave the same shine as Atlanta or New York, even though it had been producing raw, authentic talent for decades. As Yella Beezy, he broke out with That's On Me, a record that went from regional anthem to platinum certification. He worked with Lil Wayne, performed major festivals, released a full album in 2022, and looked like proof you could come up out of the Dallas streets and actually make it, without losing who you were. He'd survived a near-fatal shooting on the Sam Rayburn Tollway back in 2018, taking multiple rounds and living to keep building his career afterward. He'd also picked up arrests along the way: weapons charges, a 2021 case involving unlawful firearm possession and sexual assault that was ultimately dropped. None of it slowed him down. The survivor story was part of what made him compelling. Underneath all of that momentum, though, investigators say a years-long conflict was playing out. In public, in music, and eventually in the streets. Melvin Noble, known as Mo3, was one of Dallas's most gifted and authentic voices, the kind of rapper whose storytelling felt lived in rather than performed. People close to Dallas hip-hop knew he and Beezy occupied overlapping lanes in the same city, and that tension between them had been documented in interviews and music for years. In a 2019 appearance on Vlad TV, Beezy told the host he didn't even know who Mo3 was. A denial that would later become a significant point of contention once prosecutors started building their theory of exactly how these two men were connected. On November 11, 2020, Mo3 was driving on I-35E near the Dallas Zoo when a car pulled up beside him and a masked man got out on foot. Mo3 ran. The man chased him down, firing multiple shots, one of which struck him in the back of the head. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. Surveillance footage captured the entire ambush, later played in court, showing it wasn't a spontaneous confrontation, but something that looked planned from the start. A month later, Dallas police arrested 23-year-old Kjuan Dontrell White and charged him with murder, identifying him as the man who chased Mo3 down and fired the fatal shots. White never went to trial on that murder charge. Instead, he was prosecuted federally on firearm charges connected to the shooting and is currently serving 9 years in federal prison. But according to the prosecution's theory, White didn't act alone or on his own initiative. He was hired. And once federal authorities had him in custody facing serious charges of his own, he reportedly began cooperating, and what he allegedly told investigators pointed directly at Yella Beezy. That cooperation is what cracked the case open. A second man, Devin Maurice Brown, was also charged in connection with the conspiracy. But testimony from someone allegedly inside the plot, someone who knows exactly what was agreed to and for how much, is the kind of evidence that turns a murder case into a murder-for-hire case. In March 2025, a Dallas County grand jury indicted Conway on capital murder for remuneration, accusing him of intentionally hiring White to carry out the killing. That charge, under Texas law, makes him eligible for the death penalty. He was booked into Dallas County Jail with bond initially set at $2 million, later reduced to $750,000, after his legal team argued it down. He's been on house arrest under GPS monitoring ever since, with limited exceptions for professional engagements. Now here's what prosecutors say they've actually built. The centerpiece of the financial evidence is a $40,000 cash withdrawal Conway allegedly made in the days immediately after Mo3's killing. Money investigators believe was the payment to White. The defense disputes that interpretation entirely, and attorney Toby Shook has been consistent in arguing the state's case isn't nearly as airtight as prosecutors want a jury to believe. Beyond the cash, prosecutors point to surveillance footage, cell phone records, digital communications, and witness statements. But the cooperating testimony is the centerpiece, the kind of first-hand account that can tell a jury who made the call, what the terms were, and how the money moved, in a way no camera ever could. Then there are the lyrics, and this is where the pre-trial fight has gotten genuinely complicated. Just this past week, Beezy was back in a Dallas courtroom for a multi-day hearing over whether prosecutors can use his own songs against him at trial. Lead investigator Detective Eric Barnes spent hours connecting 3 tracks, Hitters, Keep It in the Streets, and On Your Head, to the murder-for-hire theory, testifying that the songs allegedly reference paying for violence and putting a bounty on someone's head. He testified that investigators turned to the music specifically because people close to the case weren't willing to cooperate with law enforcement directly, so YouTube and social media became part of how they pieced together what was happening. The defense pushed back hard. They brought in Dr. Eric Nielsen, a University of Richmond professor who spent years studying how rap lyrics get used in criminal prosecutions. He testified that jurors interpret rap lyrics far more literally than identical language in other genres. The same violent imagery that reads as metaphor in a country song gets treated as confession in a rap verse, and argued that allowing the songs in would introduce unconstitutional bias into the trial. Barnes rejected that framing directly, arguing Beezy isn't playing a character. These are real names, real relationships, and specific details tied to this case. The judge heard both sides over 2 days, with another hearing scheduled for July 22nd, and the trial itself still set for August 24, 2026. So what does all of this actually add up to? Legal observers watching this case closely point to 3 things stacking against Beezy heading into that courtroom. First, the shooter himself. Keiwan White is already convicted and sitting in federal prison with essentially nothing left to lose by telling the truth, and potentially something to gain by cooperating fully. If he takes the stand and tells a jury directly that Beezy hired him and gave the order, that's not circumstantial evidence. That's someone who was there. Second, the money. A $40,000 withdrawal days after the murder is exactly the kind of detail that plants itself in a juror's mind and doesn't leave whatever alternative explanation the defense offers. Third, if the judge allows those songs into evidence, prosecutors get to let Beezy's own words do part of the talking in that courtroom. None of that means the outcome is decided. The defense has been aggressive and methodical, filing motions on bond conditions, demanding full witness lists, subpoenaing jail call records, and pushing back on every piece of evidence the state has assembled. Cross-examining a cooperating witness isn't the same as neutralizing one, but it's also not nothing. And this isn't the first time courts have wrestled with rap lyrics as evidence. Cases involving artists like C. Murder have raised the same questions, and in 2023, New York became the first state to pass legislation specifically limiting how lyrics can be used against defendants. Texas has no equivalent law, which means the judge in this case has broad discretion, and whatever she decides could carry weight well beyond this one trial. For Dallas, this case reopened a wound that never really closed. Mo3's death in 2020 devastated a hip-hop community that had watched him rise, and the 2025 indictment added a new, uncomfortable layer, the possibility that another celebrated artist from that same scene didn't just know about the killing, but paid for it. That's a story that forces uncomfortable questions about where the music ends and real life begins, and younger artists watching this unfold now know exactly how far law enforcement will go to build a case out of what's said publicly, on record, when witnesses won't talk. Online, plenty of people have already decided how this ends. But that's not how the justice system actually works. What prosecutors believe they've built, and what actually survives a jury weighing everything against proof beyond a reasonable doubt, are 2 very different things. The cooperating witness will be cross-examined by one of Texas's most experienced defense attorneys. The financial evidence will be picked apart. The lyrics ruling alone could reshape what this trial even looks like. August 24, 2026, is the date that actually matters here, not the comment section, not the thumbnails. Until 12 jurors in Dallas County return a verdict, the presumption of innocence isn't a technicality. It's the whole foundation this is built on. What do you think? Does the prosecution's case hold up? Or does the defense find enough room for reasonable doubt? Drop your thoughts below and make sure you're subscribed, because when that verdict comes down in August, we'll be breaking it down the same day.